Welcome back to Yield Today with Dallin Candland. I'm here with Sharon Hughes. She is the author of Girl in the Garage and also just helps a lot of people with just going through self-worth crises and just helping them to improve their beliefs with themselves and just doing that deep work, and really admire her and what she's doing. So thanks for coming, Sharon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into just where do you think we fall short when it comes to self-worth? What do we get wrong when it comes to self-worth and understanding our self-worth?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Well, self-worth is a lot different than confidence, even though they're kind of like kissing cousins. A lot of people think that they're sort of the same thing. But self-worth is really what you believe about your value, and do you deserve good things? Do you deserve love? And boy, in this world, that's sending so many messages about, do this so that you're, good enough, look this way so that you're acceptable. It's really easy for those projected ideologies to land within us and for us to go, oh yeah, that kind of resonates. I guess I need to be that. And you and I are both faith-based, and the word tells us to renew our minds. So what does that mean, really? To renew our minds is we need to be examining what we're thinking, what we're believing, what we're allowing in.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good. I love that thought is you understand that there has to be some boundaries in order for you to maintain that sense of understanding of yourself, because what we
Mhm.
do consume and what we allow to enter into our, minds does affect us. So we have to be careful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a daily battle. One of the things that I tell all of my clients to do is to set a reminder on their phone. So, as soon as you get up, your alarm goes off. I want that reminder going off, and it's going to say, what are you choosing to believe about yourself? Because we always have a choice in what we believe. And what has happened typically is these things slipped in when we were probably little kids, a piece of it. And then something else happened in our life that built on that belief. And then something else built on that belief, rejection. Maybe, you'd ask somebody to high school prom and they said no. You didn't make the team and all your buddies did. And just like, kind of like, disappointment after disappointment has happened, but there was somebody there that said something to you that made it more personal than just being disappointed I didn't make the team. It was like the coach that said you're not good enough. I personally, I'm old enough to be your mom, but so way back in the dinosaur days, I was going to try out for cheerleading. I was 13, and all my girlfriends were trying out, and I remember being all excited about it. And we had like this cheerleading little workshop camp. You had to go and learn your tryout cheer. And I was practicing in the backyard, and my dad came home from work, and I was like, Dad, I'm going to try out for cheerleading. And, I want to show you my cheer. And I'll never forget. He stood there and he looked at me and he goes, you're not good enough. And I hadn't even done anything yet. I was just so devastated. And then it's like, I wanted him to believe in me. I wanted Dad's stamp of approval. I wanted to prove him wrong so bad. And that stuck with me for years. And then other things happened. At the point when that had happened, I had already had a lot of abuse. So it was that piling on of things that formed a narrative in my mind that I was just worthless.
Yeah, that's very difficult things to put into a teenager's mind, especially since the mind hasn't
Mhm.
even finished developing yet. And so there's just all kinds of different
Yeah.
difficulties that piles into. And 13, I feel like for me was one of the most difficult ages because I didn't feel like I had much proof of things I had done for the world. And it's like
Hmm.
you're 13, but like
Yeah.
I around me I felt like there was a lot of proof that the future for me looked very uncertain. So did you have some
Mm.
of that as well?
Oh gosh, I think because at that point, everything I'd already been through, I was just trying to survive and get through. And, at 13, it's those awkward, adolescent, early teenage years. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to find your peer group. You're trying to, fit in. And you're living in a world that's quite often doing everything it possibly can to keep you from fitting in because there's that constant narrative. I'm so grateful when I was growing up, we didn't have TikTok and Instagram and all the social media because now the pressure is so much higher, so much more intense because you're bombarded with that nonstop information. But still, it was just like not having a really stable household, not really knowing what's not what's right and what's wrong, just what was normal. So what was normal in my household was absolutely not what we would say is normal and acceptable by, any family standards. But you don't know that because that's what you've been raised in. It's not until you get older or you get away or you're exposed to something else where you start going, "Hey, wait a second. This isn't how it's supposed to be." Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of brutal.
Go a little bit deeper on that. Why, what kind of did that family dynamic look like? I mean, because I think sometimes we want to have this like perfect square, and that's just not going to happen. So,
Yeah.
did it feel like that shape was just constantly shifting? It could never stay the same, or there's just no acceptance there?
Yeah, well, it was really crazy because my parents had divorced when I was really young. I was about 5. My mom left with another guy that she thought was going to be her hero and, save the day. And he wasn't abusive like my father was, but he had other problems going on. And so she took me and my brothers. We left the state of California, and my dad came and he abducted me when I was about 7. And that was a really crazy experience. He basically took me out my window at night and drove me back to California, and I didn't see my mom for 7 years. Now, my dad was a high functioning alcoholic, and he was a very abusive man. You know, Numerous wives, they all left, said the same things about him. But what was happening was this strange formation of nothing is stable. You could count on dinner at 5:30. That was about it. But nothing else was stable. Living with somebody that's a high functioning alcoholic, he could go to work, but he couldn't seem to function in a lot of other normal arenas that a parent would. So I didn't understand that, of course. And that really played a big role in the shaping of what I went through in my later teenage years, my early 20s, and then, leading into this journey of decades of trying to hold everything together until everything finally broke wide open. And that's tough. That's a tough place to be.
It's a lot to carry, especially when I think sometimes truth can be like this blinding light, right? Or we like start to
Mm-hmm.
see things so clearly, and now we're
Mm,
like, holy, what? We just start to see like all these things that we didn't really notice, and there
yeah.
has to be some self-forgiveness, like looking back at past you and being like, you did so good and I'm so proud of you. And then there has to also be like some kind of acceptance for people not like, obviously you can't condone what they did, but it's really hard to it's really hard to forgive. I remember back when I was in high school, there's a friend I was really good friends with, and kind of in one moment our relationship completely changed in just one moment, and I couldn't think of anything that would change that moment. It was something really small, but after that, he never talked with me and everything like that. And for me, that changed how I looked at other people and made it very difficult until I finally like gave it to God and said, I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
able to love people. I just feel this like angst and difficulty. And when I was finally able to just it took time, but when I was finally able to love the person, it's like obviously the relationship's never the same, but we still stay high, and he thinks of me as well, and I've played football with his kid and stuff since then. But it's like you just never know what's possible if you're able to let love fill those gaps, but it is so
Mm-hmm.
difficult, and it's a daily battle, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe God can work with you on that, on anything, and with that especially, but it does take a lot of courage.
Yeah. And that's really rough when something happens and you absolutely have no idea what it was. There's no thing that you can point to and go, oh, this is it, so that you know how to address it. And if the person won't talk to you, that's really difficult. And leaning into forgiveness, I think it's a little bit of a dance. It's not like you wake up one day and you just go, oh, I forgive, and you're just good and you're solid. Depending, let's frame that correctly. Small infractions, yeah, but those really deep wounds that come from people that we've invested in and that we treasure and that we love, when that happens, God, that's really, really hard, because there's so much pain also. I think it can also be strongly linked to that fear. It's like you're just in this fear of, like, what has happened, is what's going to happen. Is this going to happen again in my other relationships? And of course, like you said, you want to put up all the walls. You just don't want to be open to loving, because loving takes a risk, and it's painful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not comfortable. It's not easy. There's this really cool song I remember hearing when I was serving as a 2 year mission on a mission, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it just says, "Fear is easy, love is hard." And love is letting
Mm,
go, love is holding on, love is trusting, love is so many other different things, and it's definitely not the easy route. It's way easier to be like, be like, oh, you will always be this way, or blah blah blah, even if
yeah.
that person has changed. And I don't know, it is a case by case thing, and again, it's just kind of something you have to give to God, or whatever thing you do believe, because definitely, at least I'm speaking for myself, I there's no way I would have been able to handle that, like understand that as much as I do on
Yeah.
my own.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm glad that the relationship is back a bit to where you're playing ball with his kid. So you never know. Sometimes people, like, they step away and they process something, and then they come back and they're like, oh, I blew it with you. So you never know. I hope it's fully restored.
Yeah, yeah, it's humbling. I think you just need to. This is something God's been telling me, teaching me recently. Is sometimes things just aren't worth bringing up again. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
you can show that you've changed and not bringing up something like that, and there's sort of this like unconscious approval kind of thing, sort of thing. Like, we're both not talking about that, and there's a reason for that. There's a real
Yeah.
beauty in not digging up old garbage. There's a really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
like talk that was shared in the church at one point, and talked about the Idaho Falls airport. Freeman Park used to be a sanitary landfill, and then they got rid of all the
Mm.
trash in it and put uh, Freeman Park and an airport. And so, like, at some point, there is value. That land is still perfectly valuable. It's still infinitely precious, and it can be used for something else down the road. And so that's how
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of these things, is that they're being repurposed and used in other ways, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes ways more glorious than I could have imagined.
Mm. Yeah, that what that makes me think of is when we're in that waiting for the repurposing. That's a really hard place to be. So for your audience, and I just love it, Dallin, that you go deep, that you're not a surface guy. I think that your audience really appreciates that too. But for your listeners that are thinking like, oh, well, that's right where I am. I'm waiting for something to be repurposed. I just want to encourage them, because you're going to look back and you're going to go, oh, now I see it all. So I really encourage everybody, like, keep a journal. That's such a great way of looking back at how far you've come. You can see what God has done in your life. Sometimes when we're in the middle of it, we're not seeing what he's doing, what he's orchestrating, say behind closed doors. But when you get to the other side, you're going to be like, oh, this. Now I've got that picture. It's really cool when you see that. But stay encouraged. Like, keep believing, because God is so faithful.
Yeah, amen to that. Amen to that. Yeah. For me lately, when I've been writing my 750 words, I use a thing called 750 words to write 750 words and I just brain dump, with that. And now what I do when I write that, I go back to like what was I writing about a month ago on this date or 2 months ago on this date or 3 months ago on this date, and I'm able to see so clearly. I went back to one, I think it was yesterday when I went back to one from a couple months ago, and I was like, this is really difficult. This is so frustrating. Like, what in the world, like it's just like, wow, things are coming along, things are coming together, and that gives me a lot of peace. Is that there's
Yeah.
blessings that are still in the future, and for whatever reason they haven't come, but they will come
Mm-hmm.
in time. And so right
Yeah.
now I have this beautiful preparation period that I can
Mm-hmm.
use to develop and grow and help me have more confidence when I am
Mm-hmm.
in that spot.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really encouraged by the story of Joseph. I mean, to think about the betrayal, being sold out by your brothers, being basically trafficked, getting thrown in jail, just everything that he goes through. And then he comes into the position that he does that ultimately saves his family, the very people that betrayed him. That is it's such an amazing story in itself, but it's also very reflective of our relationship with Christ, because so many of us have betrayed Christ. We've walked away, we've sold him out for, the other things in the world that are a little bit more sparkly and fun to chase after. And then he is, he's positioned there, seated in heaven at the right hand of the Father, having died for our sins. He's there to save us. And all we have to do is say, yes, that's it. That's it. And it's just an amazing way to look at what the Father will do for us. Unconditional love. Unconditional. Because if I was Joseph, that's an intense story. If I was Joseph, I don't know that I could sit there and be like, "Hey, God used what you did for good so that I could, save you." Like I would be like, maybe put him in jail for a week, and then let's have that conversation. But he was very forgiving, but I'm sure he had a lot of time to think about that.
Yeah, I smile because this really makes a lot of sense. We don't. I'm not quite sure how long he was in jail. If it was like 2 or 3 years or even longer, but like he God's playing the long game. Like Joseph was in
Yeah.
Egypt for a long time. It was like 20-ish years before
Mm-hmm.
he saw his brothers, but there was this transformation that happened through that trauma and
Mm-hmm.
through being proactive when he was in prison and understanding all these things about himself. And I love that experience and story too, because he was kind of branded as, this guy that he wasn't. And then
Mm-hmm.
he had all these opportunities to prove himself with the butler's dream, the cook's dream, and then he was able to be more or less restored to, not even his former status, but a higher status and be able
Yeah.
to serve and everything like that. Yeah, that's a beautiful story.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just really important that when we are going through anything like that, that we do have some kind of safe space we can go to. And I was blessed to have
Mm-hmm.
those, but not everybody does. I believe God
Yeah.
is the ultimate safe space and we can trust in what God has, said and promised. But, last year when I didn't have a job like my job at graduation fell through and there's all this other like internal difficult conversations with myself. It's like I'm going to be this youth counselor, that's great, but like what about all these LinkedIn connections that it just seems like my talents have been completely wasted.
Mm.
But I would have these conversations with people and especially with God, and I just kind of knew somehow things were going to be okay, and you don't even have to know why or how. There's been times where I've definitely trusted him with things that were pressing or difficult or that I didn't understand. And now on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, I still don't see completely well, but I do see a lot better that he was
Mm-hmm.
helping me out through that time. And yeah, I'm thankful for all those times I'd go on a run in the freezing cold in Utah because I can't go back to any of those moments. And those times where I
Mm.
went out and talked to people or tried to find a job, even though I didn't want to, like there's no effort wasted in that kind of from God's point of view.
Yeah, I love that. There's no effort wasted because God doesn't waste anything. He doesn't waste anything. He asks us to show up. And on the human level, it can be really, really hard to show up. That takes a lot of self-discipline, and it also takes a lot of faith of just like I'm just going to keep showing up and keep showing up because like in sales, and I hate sales, but I've been in sales trainings before. I used to say I couldn't sell a coat to an Eskimo. I was just so bad at it. But people in sales would always say it's a numbers game. Like you get the no, 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 and then finally you knock on the door that says yes. I think I believe that to a certain degree, but really it's what I want to address is the frustration when you're knocking on all the doors that say no. I believe that God guides us and each no does take us closer to the yes. And especially when we're seeking him or asking him really, we're just like really surrendered and we're saying, Lord, just open the doors that you have for me and keep the ones shut that are not for me. And it's like you're in this hallway that's full of all these doors and you go to, door to door to door and it's locked. And then, it's because he's pushing you down that hallway. Keep going, keep going. You're going to find the one that opens, the one that I have for you. And, that's, you can imagine like when you look at all the things you've walked through in your life, all the no's that we think are failures, all the no's that we think are distractions. So many times God's protecting us from something that we can't see the full picture. We think that we have it, but we can't. And you keep going down that hallway and you get to the door that opens and you go, oh, I'm finally here. Yes. And also be wise and discerning in this moment because sometimes the door will open and it's not 100% the door that God has for you. I know that just sounds so like, wait, where are you going with this? He's pushing you down the hallway. You're passing all the doors that say no to get to the one that says yes. But be discerning. And then if you cross through the door that wasn't exactly your door, but you're there, there's a grace on that because you've made the best decision that you could at the time with everything that you know. So still keep standing in your faith and saying, okay, Lord, use me while I'm here. What do I need to learn? And I say that from experience because there was a job I took. Oh my gosh, I was so excited to get this job. And there was two things. It was the best job I ever had in my life, making the greatest impact. But it was the worst company I could ever work for with the most toxic behavior I'd ever witnessed in my life. I'd literally sit in my car during lunch hour and cry and be like, God, I've got to get out of here. What happened was, did he put me there? Yeah. Was it hard? Yeah. Was he using that now for my good? Yes, because that was the time of my greatest personal and professional development in my very, very many years. I don't want to tell you how old I am.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's beautiful when we make that decision of like, I'm going to try to make the most of this. And when you try that and you've done what you can and it's still like, obviously, it's like a no-go. It's like, well, we have the power to take ourselves out of situations. And I think one thing that gives me so much peace, Sharon, is like we don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be like the same person for somebody like indefinitely. Some people want that. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, I just want you to like talk about these things whenever I want to talk about them and just play this game with me whenever I want to play it or something. And I care about you as a person, but I mostly just want to do these activities with you or something. And you don't have
Uh-huh.
to do that. You can be like, hey, well, am changing, I'm growing, and I appreciate this friendship and this part you were able to play, but I have my boundaries and I am not going to serve a previous identity, period. End of
Mm-hmm.
story. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's so much power, and it goes back to what you're saying about the word no to some
Mm-hmm.
of those distractions. And that's crazy
Mm-hmm.
to me is that something that was once so good or so helpful is now like a complete distraction.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the person that just is like, hey, play with me when I want you to play with me and do what I want you to do. When we start growing and developing, there's going to be people in your world that they don't like the new you because they're not on the same path. They can't understand it. The people that have went through it and they're kind of, further down that road than you and I are, they're the ones that are cheering for us. They're the ones that are like, "Oh yeah, I've been where you are." And it kind of sucks, but keep pressing on. So you want to find those people. And I tend to find those people in a lot of the more entrepreneurial spaces. Those are the people that are, they've been in the trenches. They know what it takes. I hate to say this, but I have found this to be personally true for myself. The church is supposed to be the hospital. That's where we're supposed to go and get fed and heal and grow. But quite often, being that the church is the hospital, there are people in leadership that are not completely healed yet. And we can be wounded by those people because sometimes they're looking through a lens of religiosity and legalism. They're not looking through a lens of grace and having that mentoring spirit, that shepherding spirit to call you higher and to call you out of where you are. And it's funny is that, but that's who I see in the entrepreneurial world. That's like, no, calling you higher. I really want to marry faith and entrepreneurship, like have that best of both worlds combined together. That's my personal goal. So that's and I think it's important to have those goals of like how do you want to roll? Like, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up in the world? And for you, Dallin, I think the things that you're looking for, I think you're actually being called to develop the very thing that you're looking for. When I wrote my book, and then later I got done with it, I was like, oh, this is actually the book that I needed years ago. When I was in like this really messy and broken place. Yeah, reading it would have helped me, but I think you almost have to get to this place where you're really ready to receive all the message. And if you can't find the message, that's a real issue. But you can basically influence a generation. You have this platform. You have a heart to serve and to mentor others. So I really think that you're being called to develop the very thing that you've been looking for. Because like who better than you to be like, this is what's needed right here, right now. And I can't find it, so I'm gonna create it. And that's really, I think that's a like a prophetic word for you as a young person in this space. But I want your audience to capture that too. What is it that you're looking for that you literally can't find? That is your purpose and calling. Go and create it. And don't look back.
Yeah. Well, I think there's so much power and beauty to that. So I appreciate you sharing. Just like, if nobody is talking about this in this way, well, who better to share it than yourself? What better horse to
Yeah.
hear it from than the actual horse instead of like some fake
Yeah.
horse or this sort of was the horse, but it's not the horse anymore or whatever like that, or this is the paper version of the horse. I don't know. Just like the actual, authentic, one of a kind, because that's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wanted to go a little bit into just why it's so important to cherish and celebrate others and their what they're doing and the good they're doing. And I've been just meeting a lot of people just in my travels and in my life, and sometimes having these little quick brushes with people and being able to help them out and lift them up. And I think a lot of it comes back to like amplifying the good instead of trying to like, what was the word? Just pretend it doesn't exist because it does exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's there for all of
Mm-hmm.
us. We're all trying to do something. So I think for me, sometimes when I like read a social media post or something, I read it, but then like how do I let myself feel after that? What am I amplifying? I think there's so much power to that. And when we have conversations with, I'm not married or dating or anything, but like, when I am married, I'm going to try to amplify all the good my wife is doing so
Mm-hmm.
she's able to hear it and see it because sometimes it's hard to see or hear.
Yeah. That's such an amazing point that you brought up. I think one of the reasons why we need to really celebrate other people is it. completely takes out jealousy and envy, which is such a big deal right now. We see this, everywhere, but look at social media. It's basically dictating to you who and how you should be, unless you're strong enough to, uh, show up as yourself. And not every young person is. And it can cause that I'm not good enough because I'm not like that. I don't look like that. I don't have those clothes. There's a lot of pressure on girls. Like when I go into social media, it cracks me up how many things come up in my feed about your skincare and your weight. There's really big issues for women. But when you can look at somebody else that really is crushing it and they're winning, or they're just coming over some hurdles, like a little hurdle. You and I might think, oh, that's a little hurdle, but to them, it's a really big hurdle. Celebrate them. It's going to elevate them to the next level. But then the bigger people in our life that are actually getting the job that we applied for, that we're like, what? Why did they get it? I'm so much more qualified. This, and we can get disappointed and get a bit wounded. That's going to plant a seed in us of insecurity. Again, the self-worth. We don't want to become to where we're, angry at other people. You can see how that unfolds in the world around you. There's so many people that are living in offense and in jealousy. So as soon as you start celebrating other people, it really knocks that out. And even to go deeper, you pray for people that are getting the things that you want, and you just say, you go, bless them. I want you to win. It takes you to the next level. There were some people that I knew in my professional career a few years ago. They just didn't get me. They were just so like, I don't understand how you roll. They probably thought she's kind of a lot, she's extra, whatever. But there was this one person in particular, and he was a senior in the company. And I came into his office one day and I just said, good morning. And I said, hey, I just want you to know that I really support you. If I can be of service, I'm happy to. And I really want you to win. His jaw just dropped. People do not know what to do with that. And it's kind of funny. I've actually made it a little bit of a game, especially people that don't like me. Because why would I not want them to win? It has no bearing on my life if they lose, right? If they lose, it's just like, okay, bummer. I don't want to be the person that's like, oh yeah, you're just not a good person. You shouldn't have gotten that contract or that deal. Oh, this is how the world is. So no bearing on my life if they lose, but the bearing on my life when they win is, it's just good. It's just simply good. It doesn't even matter if I like them or not. We need goodness for the sake of good. We need to cheer for people just for the sake of cheering for them. You have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. No idea. I know I'm kind of going long here, but people that have known me and then they read my book, they were just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Well, of course you didn't. And that's the same thing for everybody. None of us really know. The guy that's driving the Mercedes and he's closing, the six-figure deals, he climbs into bed at night alone. Alone. His kids aren't talking to him. His wife has left. And he doesn't know how he's going to make it the next day. He's wondering, how can I keep this facade up? If people only knew that everything fell apart at home, what would they think of me? That's the reality of it. It's not what we see on TikTok of people walking the red carpet. All those people, now, their name is in lights and their movies out and this, that, and the other. You know what their problem is? I got to get my next gig. What if my time's up? What if I don't get cast again? I mean, I had an agent for a while. I know a little bit about that side, but all we see is the highlights in the world. We're not seeing the wizard behind the curtain.
Wizard behind the
That's
curtain. I'm gonna have to think about that because that's like Wizard of Oz kind of stuff, and it's like
it totally is.
there's like all these things happening. They think he's super super powerful, and he's like actually like this. No, huh?
Yeah. I know that was a long monologue, but
That's beautiful. We love that. That was good. It just makes me think of yeah, there does need to be some openness to like this is not exactly how things are. And I think this is feelings, you know.
hmm
I've been
yeah.
learning so much about just letting myself feel things. Is that's I tend to feel things first and then there's like thinking and doing stuff, you know. And this is
hmm
something I've really come across over the last like 5 or 6 months. It's like you
hmm
understand that you feel first and it's like, okay, just because I'm feeling this way doesn't mean I'll feel this way tomorrow or I'll feel this way always or whatever. And it's
Mm.
like just let yourself feel it and don't hide it. But yeah, there's so much gems you dropped in there. I'm sure I will play this on repeat one of these days. I'll play it and just be like, there's some really good stuff here. So, what would be some like last words of advice you'd give to somebody that's struggling to feel safe or struggling in this in between spot? And of course, how do we get in touch with you and find more about the book?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep renewing your mind. Even if you're listening to this and you're not a person of faith, you need to really stop and ask yourself, what am I believing about myself? Full stop. Answer that question. And is it true? Full stop. Answer that question. Those really are the two questions that God asked me when I was at one of the lowest lows of my entire life. And that became the framework of my book. Well, right at that time, I was in corporate training and I took those two questions into a training. Excuse me, I'm getting a frog. And those two questions literally wrecked two different rooms, both occasions, guys, girls, all ages from every department in the company. I couldn't believe it. Like somebody came up to me crying after and they go, I haven't talked to my family in 10 years and I'm going to call them tonight. I had no idea what was going on in this guy's life. I'd see him in the office and I was like, nice guy, happy go lucky. That's what I mean. You just don't know what's going on. You don't know what they're carrying around. So make sure that those two questions, like you're asking yourself, that you need to put that in your journal and ask it regularly. But yeah, just keep showing up. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Don't give up on yourself. God doesn't give up on you. So, why should we give up on ourselves? Just keep going strong. And hit me up at sharonhughes.net. I'd love to hear from your listeners and hear if they've got a breakthrough from this pretty deep conversation that we're having. This is pretty cool. I'm really loving it. It's a great way to start my day because it's really early in California here.
Yeah, yeah. I guess one little last thought I'll add on that is that sometimes there are these beautiful mercies that happen in the morning, and if we're willing
Mm,
to face like, and it
hmm
doesn't have to be in the morning, but for me, it's generally sometimes in the morning. I'll like wake up or I'll go on this walk and something will come to me and I'm like, wow, that is beautiful. And if I hadn't been awake, maybe I would have missed this. So just love that being open to God or whatever you believe might be calling out to you or reaching out to you through this or
hmm
through whatever might be happening in your day today. So yeah,
Yeah.
I will 100% give your book a full in-depth read before we talk again. But yeah, everybody check out the things from Sharon and ask yourself those questions like, what do I believe about myself today? And is that true? So thank
Yeah.
you so much, Sharon.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you this morning. You're
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you. You as well, Sharon. Just your story and your voice is very powerful. I'm thankful your message is getting out there.
Oh, thank you so much.
You got it.